What is up, and welcome into the Monday Night Football Bets Show here, presented by FTNBets.com. Go check it out, man. FTNBets.com's got a lot of good stuff going on right now. A lot of great picks in there, a lot of great tools, a lot of great information. Of course, you can use the promo code RATPACK to get yourself a discount at any one of our sites, FTNFantasy.com, FTNDaily.com. We got guys winning $100,000 contests left and right here. You could go over there, check out the optimizer as well, which is pretty awesome. And of course, FTNBets.com, like I mentioned, get in on the bet tracker, follow our bets, tail Chris Meany. That's usually my advice to anybody. Hockey, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about hockey, but I know I could tail Chris Meany and make money. So that is worth the price of admission right there. Of course, on this show, every Monday, I break down 5 player props that I like. I also talk about the game line here for tonight's action, New York Giants and Kansas City Chiefs. I'll talk about my line, my projected over-under, and any plays I might be making here. But I also will occasionally give a rundown of some of the big news, big storylines that come out of the weekend. And there's probably no bigger storyline right now in the NFL than Derrick Henry suffering a broken foot, the 5th metatarsal, and this now will keep him sidelined for what looks to be at least 2 months. Now, technically, the timetable is 6 to 10 weeks. The full anticipation here, though, is 6 weeks would be if everything went absolutely, utterly perfectly for Derrick Henry. It's probably more likely 8 weeks. 8 weeks doesn't do us any good for fantasy football purposes, that's for sure. Because, I mean, at that point, we're essentially talking about the fantasy championship he'd be back for. And we're not guaranteed to get there, especially if we just lost Derrick Henry. What's going to happen in the meantime for this team? Well, obviously, they have a gaping hole at running back because the team was built around this generational player, this workhorse in an era where there are no workhorses in the NFL. He was breaking the mold for sure over the last, 3.25 seasons, give or take, whatever you want to call that. But regardless, the team's built around him. The team is not going to be built around Jeremy McNichols. The team is not going to be built around Dontrell Hilliard. The team is not going to be built around Adrian Peterson. If they end up signing him, the team is kicking the tires on him. I'm sure they'll bring in other veterans as well. It's not going to be built around any of those guys. So there isn't a 1-for-1 replacement. Not that you would expect there to be. There isn't a 1-for-1 replacement in this backfield. Can we get 75% of Derrick Henry out of one of those guys? Even that might be asking too much, to be honest with you. Now, as of right now, it looks like Jeremy McNichols is the most likely candidate, but I'll tell you, I look at McNichols, I see a passing down back, and that's really how he's largely been used with this team. I can't see him stepping in and being a 15-carry, 3-catch guy. Can't say, even in a best case scenario, maybe he winds up being something like what Chuba Hubbard has been for Carolina right now. And that was a little bit of a surprise, a pleasant surprise, stepping into that role when Christian McCaffrey originally left with injury. I had thought, I don't see Hubbard as a 3-down back. And even the Panthers showed that initially. They didn't use him as a 3-down back the first week, but since then been a good surprise ultimately there in terms of how they've used him. He's not as effective as Christian McCaffrey. Nobody expected him to be as effective, but if you can get you 75%, 80% of Christian McCaffrey, it's not terrible. I just don't know if Jeremy McNichols can do that. And is it something where they do sign an early down runner like Adrian Peterson at 36 years old, and that player now gets us 12 to 15 carries a game, and then you still have McNichols with 3, 4, 5 catches? It's going to be a bit of a mess. This is a tough situation for anybody who plays fantasy football and has lost Derrick Henry. Now, for the Titans, I mean, their objective is still to obviously play some meaningful games in January and perhaps even February. So they're focused on that. They're going to take their time with Derrick Henry. They were in a great position with him. Maybe they can still be in a good position without him. But we'll have more clarity. Of course, if you play fantasy football and you want waiver wire recommendations, I put out my waiver wire rankings every Tuesday over at ftnfantasy.com, and we will address this as we get more information. Obviously, the big story, though, not the only big story, the biggest, though, was Henry. We also have Jameis Winston out for the season, torn ACL. Man, that really stinks for Jameis. Was solidifying his role as the starter. Coming off that team had a big win. Obviously, he didn't play through the whole game, but beating Tampa, that's a huge win for New Orleans. And the team is trending in such a great direction. The defense is excellent. You don't quite have all the offensive weapons that you might want on that squad, but you have Alvin Kamara. You do have, you have some good role players there, and maybe the potential of Michael Thomas coming back. But they will move forward now without Jameis. So the question is, who's going to be the quarterback? And honestly, you would immediately say Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill's been in the concussion protocol for nearly a month. This is scary for Taysom Hill. Hopefully he's able to progress his way through the protocol. But if not, we're in Trevor Siemian territory, and that will take all the wind out of New Orleans sails. Not that Jameis is an elite quarterback by any means, but he is a sizable step up from Trevor Siemian. So it is unfortunate there for New Orleans. Could be Taysom Hill. Anytime a player is in the concussion protocol for this long, it turns into it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary. So hopefully he can progress through. Gives him a much better shot, obviously, than Trevor Siemian, but maybe not as good of a shot as Jameis Winston there for that squad. The other injury of note was James Robinson, but that is being called a day-to-day injury. So that's good right there for James Robinson. All right, so let's move into this game tonight. A pivotal game for Kansas City coming. This is a team that after last week, there's a lot of question marks, but I tell you what, they have beat up on the NFC East so far this season. We have seen 2 games here against the NFC East. They did face Philadelphia. They faced Washington. They beat up on them. So maybe this is a little bit of a get right. Right now, the spread is 10.5. Kansas City giving 10.5, over under 52. I'm actually pretty close to the spread on this one. I'm at 9.5. So, a point below. I do have a lot of people who say, oh, Kansas City never covers. Well, if you think that's the case, take the Giants. I'm not going to play this one. It's a no play for me. But I do have it slightly under that spread. We'll see if that thing moves by game time. I don't anticipate it moving, but either way, that's where I am on that. 52 over under. I'm at 50.7, so a slight under here. Have been noticing a lot of trends here in terms of projections where projected lines for me come out pretty significantly under the over-unders. Not exactly sure why that is right now, but I've been taking advantage of it where I can. This one, I don't want to play this one either. I know, it sounds a little tempting being 1.3 points under, but this one, I don't know. If I came in at like 48, I would be hammering the under, but I'm just too close to the over-under in this one. So I'm not going to play either of them, though. I do have the slight under, and I do have a slight cover for the New York Giants. Let's dive into the props, though, because this is where really I think we can take advantage, and we can certainly take advantage on the Kansas City side. I'm going to key in on Darrell Williams. Now, coming off of last week, I know for fantasy purposes, a lot of people out there not too excited about Darrell Williams, but I will tell you that those games against the Eagles and the football team are the ones that I really want to focus in on. Kansas City has crushed the NFC East. And in those 2 games, they had 32 team rushing attempts against the Philadelphia Eagles. They had 28 against Washington. In games where they get out to a lead, you know what Andy Reid's going to do. He's going to hand the football to his running backs. Well, he doesn't have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so that just means Darrell Williams a whole heck of a lot. In that game against Washington, he was up over 20 carries in that contest. So 14.5 rushing attempts right now, actually getting plus 100 on BetMGM. Give me that right there. I love when I get plus 100. And I'm going to take the over. Now, I don't think this is a 20-plus carry outing, but could we see 16, 17 carries? Absolutely out of Darrell Williams. And I think he bounces back for fantasy football purposes too, if you're worried there. Patrick Mahomes. Ordinarily, I don't find it very profitable to go after his passing yards lines. Oftentimes, they're pretty solid. I don't like playing passing touchdown lines just in general, unless we're talking about, say, playoff games, Super Bowl, when I want to get as much action in on one game as I can. But usually during the regular season, I stay away from them. But one area where we can key in on for quarterbacks that can potentially be profitable if we're playing trends or if we're playing matchups or if we're playing what we know about the quarterback in a given season, rushing yards. Right now, 19 and a half rushing yards. Now, that line is higher elsewhere, but that's right now at PointsBet, minus 125 on the over. Just a little bit to the over. But this feels like an absolute gimme putt. He's been over this line, and in some games, significantly over this line in each of his last 5. The offense with that offensive line struggling and Patrick Mahomes not having enough time back there, it has created a lot of situations where he does run. He is not a running quarterback in a traditional sense. We don't equate that with Patrick Mahomes first and foremost, but he is sneaky good as a runner. 19 and a half rushing yards is not a particularly high line for him right now. The only worry that I ever have taking rushing yards on teams who are heavily favored is that we get kneels at some point. If we get kneels at the end of the game, of course, Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, probably the most infamous of those kneels, where he had an over on his rushing yards and the kneel took him way under because he backed up so far on the kneel. But regardless, I'm going to go over. I'm going to take the risk with Patty Mahomes in this one. Mecole Hardman. Obviously, people key in on Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Now, I have noticed this with player props. If you're new to player props, something I do recommend is not just betting the stars. The stars are the obvious players that we gravitate towards. And I know I'm saying this after just talking about Patrick Mahomes, but we gravitate towards the stars. These are the players we know the best. These are the players we want to see, hit that over for us, what have you. But sometimes there are better opportunities with some of the lesser players. And Mecole Hardman, as the number 3 target in that offense, wouldn't call him completely irrelevant, but he isn't exactly the superstar of this squad. And the line shows it for receiving yards. 37 and a half is where we are right now. It's minus 110 for the over at FanDuel. And I do like this over. He has been over this in 2 of his last 3. Last week he didn't, but the previous 2 games he did. He's seen at least 5 targets in all those games. In week 5, he had 12 targets. We have Tyreek Hill still a little banged up, definitely not playing at 100%. We have a game that there's going to be a lot of throw, at least early in this game, out of I think both teams, and I really think the Giants continue to throw throughout the game. But enough there where Mecole Hardman doesn't have to do that much to get up over this line. So I'll take the over there on 37 and a half receiving yards for Mecole Hardman. I mentioned just a few minutes ago, lines being different on different books. It's always a great practice when you're playing player props to shop around a little bit, find the best lines or the best odds. Sometimes the lines may be the same, but one book has it at minus 115. The other book has it at minus 105. May not seem like a big difference, but all those little edges you can take over the long term add up, right? Little edge here, eventually take it a whole bunch of times, ends up being a big edge over the long term. So how do you do that? How do you find it quickly? Instead of going to every single book on your phone or every single book on your laptop, you can just go over to ftnbets.com and check out the prop shop. You don't have to be a subscriber to check it out. Type in Mecole Hardman, boom, you get all Mecole Hardman's lines. Not only the lines, but the lines for the books in your state as well, because you can sort by state. So if you're in Pennsylvania like me, only the PA books, you get all of his lines there. You can see which line is the best, which one you prefer, and then play it, get that value. And of course, if you didn't already have an account at that particular book, you can click right on through, get the bonus as well, and get in on things over there at that sports book. That is the prop shop at ftnbets.com. All right, 2 on the Giants side. I gave you 3 on the Chiefs side. Why just 2 on the Giants side? Well, there aren't a ton of Giants lines out there right now. We are waiting to see if Kadarius Toney does play, so sometimes that holds up player prop lines. I do think he's going to play. He traveled with the team, got over the ankle sprain. He's still going to be hindered by it a little bit, but this kid's so dynamic when he's on the field. The football just finds him, and Daniel Jones loves him. Remember, the last time we saw Kadarius Toney, he had 6 snaps, and he was targeted on 3 of those 6. So he's going to see the volume when he's in there. Of course, Sterling Shepard will be back on the field. No Kenny Golladay here, no Saquon Barkley as well. And I'll talk about Barkley's fill-in here in just a minute, but I want to go back to Daniel Jones. So this season, he's had at least 32 passing attempts in every game except the game he was concussed. I did have a little bit of a head scratcher when I saw PointsBet's line at 32.5. Now it is way juiced to the over, minus 149 to the over. So what? Just bet a little bit more. Bet a unit and a half. I can't see a scenario where he's under this. And I realize that's not reasonable. Here's the reasonable line. 34.5 passing attempts on DraftKings. Juice to the under, actually. It's minus 105 to the over right now. And I want to take that over as well. I do think that even with the receivers not at 100% full strength, no Kenny Golladay, they're still going to have to throw. I buy this line. I buy the game script that this line is telling us is going to happen. The Chiefs get out to a lead. The Giants have to claw their way back. They continue to throw and throw and throw. And that's what we're going to see. So 34.5, I think he sails by this line right here. And I'm going to take that, especially when I get minus 105 to take that line. Now, I mentioned Saquon Barkley. He will not be out there in this contest. It looks like he was getting very close to returning, so maybe we will see him here coming up in the following week. But regardless, Devontae Booker is out there. Now, we have seen a blowout loss with Saquon Barkley not on the field. That Rams game was a debacle for the Giants. They got completely blown out of the water. And in that contest, Devontae Booker had 12 rushing attempts. Makes sense. When you're playing from behind, you're not going to be pounding the ball on the ground, so you have very little opportunity to do so. Right now, 13.5 rushing attempts is the line, standard across the board. DraftKings has it for the under at plus 100. So again, you're getting favorable odds on the under. This one is close. This one is very close. I'm not saying this is the best, slam dunk on the board here or anything like that. It is close, but I want to take the under on this one because I anticipate a game script where I said, hey, these bets, they correlate with each other. I think they're going to throw a lot. If you're going to throw a lot, you're not going to pass a lot, so you can kind of double dip here. And these bets tell a story that makes sense. Daniel Jones airs it out. They play from behind. They have to abandon the run, and therefore Devontae Booker is under 13.5 rushing attempts. We may see some of the other guys in that backfield as well, but Booker here taking that under on his rushing attempts. Darrell Williams, over 14.5 rushing attempts. Patrick Mahomes, over 19.5 rushing yards. Mecole Hardman, over 37.5 receiving yards. Daniel Jones, over, we'll call it 34.5 because that's the widely available line. Passing attempts, and Devontae Booker, I'll give you that under there, on 13.5 rushing attempts. Like I said, I do have a slight under on this one on the total. I'm not going to play it. And I do have the Giants barely covering this thing. But I don't want to take that one either. Of course, remember on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern, right here where you're watching this. If you're watching this on YouTube, we love comments. And there are some comments here. I'm going to get over to it in a second. But remember, on Fridays, what I have is, of course, JR Weekly, 2 o'clock Eastern. I run through every game, give you some fantasy thoughts and a player prop for each one of those games. The second take extra said, do I think Tyreek Hill scores? I don't like taking touchdown props. Touchdowns they're one of the toughest stats to predict. He always is going to have a good chance of scoring. But the best thing that we can do is compare player projections to your lines to get your implied probability of the lines. I would have to anticipate that you're going to have a slight edge on a bet. I don't have the odds in front of me right here, but your answer is maybe. Give you that very definitive answer. I'm very careful about what I play in player props. I don't like to play touchdowns, anytime touchdowns, first touchdowns, those sorts, because again, I want to play the stats that are the most predictable from a projection standpoint. That's why I love rushing attempts, passing attempts, because I don't even have to predict efficiency. It's just straight up volume there. When you add into the mix touchdowns are the trickiest stat to predict for sure. At least receiving and rushing touchdowns, although rushing touchdowns not I guess in this case, you just want any touchdown. Sammy's saying Kadarius Toney will do it again. Let's go Buffalo. I think we're getting them mixed up here. But yeah, the it's all in caps too. Kadarius Toney is, I do think, gets back on the field. I do think he picks right up where he left off. The team already has kind of made it abundantly clear. Joe Judge said they love to get the ball in this kid's hands. They have to get those touches where he's in space and he can do what he does best. And really, it's not a fluke if it happens multiple times. First game he goes out there pretty solid. Second game, the game that he got ejected from, in terms of this role. Second game in this role, boom. That was the big one. And then even the third game when he got hurt, it looked like he was off to the races that day. So yeah, him back on the field is going to be a lot of fun. Leave those comments in YouTube. Hit like, hit subscribe, do all the smashing or whatever they say on YouTube to your heart's content here. But make sure you have that there so you get notified for future videos. And like I said, on Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, JR Weekly will be back to break it all down for you then. In the meantime, hit me up on Twitter at Jeff Ratcliffe, at Jeff Ratcliffe on Instagram, ftnfantasy.com, ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com, promo code RADPACK. All right, enjoy the football tonight. I'll catch you on Friday for JR Weekly at 2 Eastern. I'm Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'm out.